Station Valoris looked like a huge metal castle floating in the dark of space. It was huge, bigger than most cities, and the Galactic Concord owned it. The Concord was like a government that linked together many different alien worlds. They kept something special inside this huge station. It was called the Celestial Arsenal, which was just a fancy name for a museum that had really old and powerful weapons from civilizations that no longer exist. There was a suit of armor in a room deep inside the arsenal. The walls of the room were made of some kind of glowing crystal. But this armor was special. People all over the galaxy had heard stories about Kethmar's war suit. The armor was about 8 feet tall and made of dark metal that looked like it would swallow light. There were strange symbols and patterns all over its surface that no one could read anymore. The words were too old and too forgotten. For years, scientists tried to figure out what the symbols meant, but they never got anywhere. The armor was kept in a glowing energy field that made it look like it was underwater. The field made a low hum that never stopped, day or night. Guards were always on duty around it, not because they were afraid someone would steal it, but because it was so important. People traveled from all over the galaxy to see it and stand in front of it, thinking about the person who wore it thousands of years ago. The old stories say that this armor belonged to the first Sentinel. No one knew what kind of animal he was or what his real name was. Some aliens said he was a god. Some people said he was just a normal person who did amazing things. The story said that he protected the whole galaxy from a terrible threat that would have destroyed everything. The armor was all that was left after he left. It became a symbol, a way to remember that heroes were real and that one person could make a difference. But this is what made the war suit more than just a museum piece. It still worked. Or at least everyone thought it still worked. The armor had power in it, which was an old technology that was much more advanced than anything that could be built in the modern galaxy. If someone could turn it on, wake it up, and make it work, that person would become very powerful. The suit was supposed to fit the wearer so well that it felt like a second skin. It would give them more strength, speed, and intelligence. It had weapons that could destroy entire mountains. It had shields that could stop anything. That's what the story said anyway. The Galactic Concord thought of something. They made something called the Trial of Activation. Any warrior from any planet could come and try to turn on the armor. If they succeeded, they would become the new Sentinel, the galaxy's guardian. They would be in charge of the Concord's best soldiers. They would be known all over the universe. It was the best prize, the highest honor anyone could get. The rules were easy to understand. You walked into a circle on the floor around the armor. The energy field would go down. Then you had to connect to the suit in some way, wake up its systems, and talk to it. That was all there was. There are no time limits or special requirements. It was just you and the old armor checking to see if you were worthy. For 300 cycles, which is like 300 years for people, warriors came to try. And every one of them failed for 300 cycles. People treated the first attempts like big events. Video screens would show entire planets watching as their best player stepped up to try. The crystalline warriors came. They were living rock beings that could talk to machines with their minds. They touched the armor and pushed their minds into it, looking for something to hold on to that would wake it up. There was no change. Next came the huge warlords who were aliens with 6 arms and skin like tank plating. They were raised to fight and win, and they were trained to do so from birth. They tried to make the armor work by pulling levers and pushing buttons that weren't there anymore. The suit didn't pay any attention to them at all. Priests brought old rituals, scientists brought new technology, and diplomats brought messages of peace and unity. The armor turned down all of them equally. After a while, the tries didn't seem as special anymore. They still happened a lot because hope is a stubborn thing, but the galaxy stopped caring. People called the warsuit of Kethmar the impossible challenge, the riddle with no answer. Some people began to doubt the truth of the stories. It could be that the armor was just broken and had been for thousands of years and no one wanted to say so. The best scientists at Concord looked at it between trials. They used all of their scanners, sensors, and other technology. They could tell that the armor's power source was on. It had energy flowing through it like blood through veins. But something was in the way, keeping it from waking up all the way. A lock or security system that no one could figure out. They wrote papers about it, gave talks about it, and argued with each other about their theories. It didn't matter. The armor didn't make a sound. One scientist, an old alien named Dr. Kelvin, had been studying the war suit for 40 years. He had done everything he could think of. He learned dead languages, studied ancient engineering, and even sat in front of the armor for months at a time, hoping to get some kind of insight. In the end, he gave up. He wrote something in his last report that made a lot of people sad. He said that the technology was too old and not like anything else that is modern. Time had taken away the information needed to turn it on. It might not have been meant to be used again. Maybe it was only meant to remind people of what used to be, not what could be again. But warriors kept coming even after that report. We all want to believe in magic, whether we're human, alien, or any other kind of creature. We want to believe that there is something special out there waiting for the right person. The Concorde kept the trials going because if they stopped, they would have to admit they had lost. Station Valoris kept floating in space, and the warsuit of Kethmar kept waiting in its glowing prison. People kept hoping that the next warrior would be the one. The Vextheri, a race that looked like they were made of living crystal, were the first to really try to turn on the warsuit. They were tall, maybe 9 or 10 feet, and their bodies were made of a clear, glowing material that looked like diamond mixed with colored glass. When they thought really hard, you could see electricity moving across their surfaces in patterns. These creatures were born to be technicians. They could link their brains directly to computers, machines, and other electronic devices. They didn't need screens or keyboards. They just touched something and it became a part of them. The best of them was Commander Thel 9. He had connected with computers from 20 different dead civilizations and brought them back to life. He once fixed the navigation system on a starship by just putting his hand on it and thinking. Everyone who saw him walk into the arsenal thought this would finally be it. The warsuit would wake up at this point. The energy field dropped with a sound like wind chimes. Thel 9 stepped forward, and as he got ready, his crystalline body pulsed with different colors. He put both hands on the warsuit's chest plate, and his whole body lit up like a Christmas tree. You could see the energy coming out of him and into the armor, looking for a way to connect. He was going deep into the suit systems in his mind, following circuits that were older than most civilizations. He drew a map of every wire, circuit board, and connection. He touched something that felt like a neural network which should have reacted to his thoughts. It was 6 hours later. People in the audience who had come to watch started to feel uneasy. Thel 9 didn't say anything or move. On the surface of his crystal, sweat or something like it began to form. His inner light, which had been bright and sure, started to flicker and fade. His body began to shake. He was doing something that was taking all of his energy. In the end, he stepped back. The light inside him was barely aglow, like a flashlight that was running out of batteries. He looked at the warsuit again and then at the people who had come. He didn't say a word. He just walked away, his shoulders slumped, and his light was dimmer than anyone had ever seen it. It wasn't just embarrassing for a living crystal being who could talk to machines to not be able to connect with the warsuit. It was like being told that you weren't good enough and that your best skill didn't matter. That same day, Thel 9 left the station and never came back. The warriors from the Draken Imperium came next, and they were nothing like the Vextheri. The crystal beings were all about connecting minds and using technology, but the Drakens were all about physical strength. These were huge animals that looked like tanks with legs. They had 4 arms and each one could crush steel. Their skin was thick and had scales on it that could stop bullets. They were literally bred for battle. For 1,000 generations, their people had been choosing the strongest, fastest, and toughest people and making sure that only those genes lived on. A Draken warrior could punch through a wall of concrete without slowing down. Their hero was Knight Captain Bronder. He had won 300 duels and lost none. During the border wars, he ripped enemy tanks apart with his bare hands. Just being in the arsenal made the room feel smaller. He was almost 12 feet tall and probably weighed as much as a small car. His 4 arms were covered in scars from fighting all his life. Bronder didn't waste time with formalities. He walked right up to the warsuit and started to feel it with his hands. The plan was easy. If the mental approach didn't work, maybe just using physical strength would. Somewhere there had to be joints, servos, and manual controls for the armor. He would find them and make them work. He pulled on the armor's shoulder joint. His muscles, each one the size of a human head, were bulging with work. Nothing happened. He tried the neck, the elbow, and the knee. He looked all over the suit, feeling for buttons, switches, and release mechanisms. His fingers, which were surprisingly soft for their size, ran along the seams and panel lines. He found what looked like manual override ports and tried to turn them on. He tried to turn joints, stretch limbs, and open access panels. Bronder was clearly angry after 3 hours of trying. This warrior could bend the hulls of starships and had literally ripped doors off of bunkers during battle, but he couldn't move a single piece of the warsuit. The armor was so strong that every part was stuck together like it was welded. He made one last attempt, grabbing the suit's right arm with all 4 of his hands and pulling as hard as he could. His back muscles looked like cables. There was a pulse in his forehead. Everyone who was watching thought they saw something move for a second. But it was just Bronder's feet sliding on the floor. The armor stayed still. He let go, breathing hard, and looked at the warsuit like it had insulted him personally. In his culture, losing a fight was okay. It was terrible to fail at a challenge like this, with people from all over the galaxy watching. He didn't say anything. He simply turned around and left, and no one from the Draken Imperium ever tried the trial again. After that, there were more tries, each one different but all ending the same way. The Mindweavers came. They were strange creatures that were mostly brain and not much body. They floated in tanks of liquid and could read minds, move things with their minds, and even change how people felt. They tried to connect with the war suit on a mental level to get it to wake up. They sat around it and chanted in languages that made your ears hurt for days. The armor didn't pay any attention to them at all. The technomancers of Rigel came with gear that looked like it had been made by mixing magic and science. They put machines around the warsuit that hummed, glowed, and did things that physics teachers would say were impossible. They talked about quantum harmonization, which is the idea of matching the armor's frequency with the frequency of reality. They worked for 2 weeks straight, making changes, calibrating, and recalculating. When they finally turned on their equipment, there was a flash of light, a sound like thunder, and then nothing. The warsuit stayed the same. Even the Void Priests, who said they could understand the universe on a spiritual level, tried. They did rituals that had been done for thousands of years, ceremonies that were meant to wake up the spirits inside old things. They lit incense that smelled like cinnamon and ozone. They sang songs in the oldest language that anyone knew. They made promises, prayed, and gave gifts. The warsuit stood still and didn't care. The legend grew with each failure. People began to write songs about the armor that couldn't be broken. Scientists wrote papers arguing about what the problem might be. Some people said it was a genetic lock, which meant that only someone with the Sentinel's DNA could turn it on. Some people said it was a test of character, and that the armor was judging people and finding them unworthy. Some people thought it might be broken after all, since everyone was trying to start an engine that didn't have any gas. Dr. Kelvin, the Concord's chief technomancer, was an old being who had been studying ancient technology for longer than most species had been able to travel through space. He had 12 degrees in archaeology, engineering, and other fields that most languages don't even have names for. He had looked at the warsuit more than anyone else, spending years doing tests, scans, and experiments. Finally, after seeing the 100th failure, he made an announcement that broke a lot of hearts. He stood in front of the warsuit, looking tired and sad, and said what everyone was thinking but no one wanted to say. The technology was just too old. The people who made this armor knew things that are now completely gone. It was like asking someone today to fix a machine from a million years in the future. You wouldn't even know where to begin. The warsuit could still be in one piece and even have power, but the person who built it took the secret to waking it up with them. He quietly suggested that it might never have been meant to be used again. It might have been meant to remind everyone that great things used to exist, even if we can't get to them anymore. But people kept trying even after that speech. No one, human or alien, is naturally inclined to give up. The trials went on and the warsuit kept waiting. The cargo ship Betty's Revenge didn't look like much. It was old, put together with parts from a dozen different companies, and it made strange noises that would scare anyone who didn't know ships. Jack Miller made it work though. Jack was the kind of mechanic who could fix anything if he had enough time and the right tools. He had been flying Betty's Revenge for 7 years, through asteroid fields, solar storms, and even once when they accidentally flew through a military exercise zone. Betty's Revenge limped into Station Valoris on Tuesday afternoon with a problem. They couldn't make the next run to the outer colonies because one of the plasma injectors had blown out halfway through their last jump. These things did happen. Space travel was tough on equipment, and even new plasma injectors were hard to work with. This one had been past its prime for 3 years. Captain Lisa Grant was a no-nonsense woman who ran a tight ship even though the equipment was held together by prayers and welding. She went straight to the docking authority to fill out the maintenance paperwork and argue about the fees for docking. She was good at arguing about prices. Jack took his tablet with the list of parts and went to the station to look for a supplier. Finding parts shouldn't be too hard because Station Valoris was huge and one of the biggest trading hubs in this field. But Jack had never been to Valoris before. When he got off the ship, it felt like he was in a small city made of metal and lights. There were aliens all over the place, some of which he knew and some he didn't. He couldn't see the ceiling because it was so high up and the fake clouds they put in for atmosphere were in the way. Signs that were holographic and changed shape floated in the air, pointing the way to different areas. The issue was that Jack couldn't read the languages they were written in. He kind of knew Galactic Standard, but the other 2 languages might as well have been abstract art. He started walking, thinking that it wouldn't be too hard to find the business district. Right? Just follow the crowds. It took him about 15 minutes to realize he was completely lost. The station was like a puzzle. There were hallways that went in every direction, some up, some down, and some that looked like they turned back on themselves. He walked past the same food stand twice, which was embarrassing because the vendor definitely knew who he was the second time. Jack saw what looked like a service corridor, which is a path that maintenance workers use to get around quickly. He had used a lot of those on other stations. They usually took you to the important places. He ducked inside, walking past humming machines and pipes that were out in the open. This was more comfortable anyway. Jack knew how to use maintenance corridors. They were clear. The hallway led to a big hall and Jack stopped right there. This wasn't a place to get help. This was a whole different thing. The room was very big and the walls looked like they were glowing from the inside. Holographic displays floated through the air, showing pictures and text in languages he didn't know. There were aliens here too, but they weren't doing normal station things like shopping or eating. They stood still and respectfully as if they were in a museum or a church. There was a suit of armor in the middle of it all, behind some kind of energy barrier that looked like heat waves on a highway. But saying it was just armor was like saying a battleship was just a boat. It was huge, maybe 8 feet tall, and the metal was so dark that it looked like it drank in the light around it. There were complex patterns and symbols on every surface that seemed to mean something important. It felt like it was watching even though it couldn't see anything. "Whoa," Jack said out loud, forgetting for a moment that he was probably somewhere he shouldn't have been. He moved closer to the barrier and looked at the armor piece by piece. That's a great rig. His mechanic brain was already working, taking in what he saw and storing it. The joint systems looked advanced, maybe hydraulic or pneumatic. There were power conduits that might have been running under the surface of the chest plate. The design of the helmet suggested that it had advanced sensors, probably full tactical displays. This was real engineering, the kind that made modern military equipment look like toys. Behind him, someone spoke in Galactic Standard with a wet, bubbling sound. "Visitor, you are in a restricted area. This is the warsuit of Kethmar." Jack turned around and saw something that looked like a jellyfish that had been turned inside out and taught to float. It was about 5 feet wide, see-through, and he could see organs inside it pulsing. There were tentacles hanging down from its main body, and it was talking even though it didn't have a mouth. Even though the sound was strange, his translator implant made the words clear. "Yeah, I can see that," Jack said as he turned back to the armor. His hands were already itching to touch it and find out how it worked. "Do you mind if I look more closely? I swear I won't break anything." The jellyfish, whose name was Overseer Queln according to the badge next to it, rippled in what could have been surprise or laughter. People were still new to the galactic community, and they were known for being rude and bold. But their honesty was refreshing. Queln thought about the request. The arsenal did have rules for cultural observers though. As part of interspecies understanding and cooperation, different species were allowed to see the artifacts. The person hadn't broken any rules yet. They had just gone into an area that most people didn't go to. And to be honest, Queln was interested. People were interesting. Their way of looking at things was very different from how people in older civilizations did. Queln said, "You have 5 minutes." Its body changed colors as it spoke. "Don't touch anything. Many people have tried to. The war suit is a holy relic." Jack cut in and walked around the barrier to get a better look. "Yeah, I've heard things about this. Every warrior in the galaxy tries to wake it up, but so far no one has been able to." "Is that right?" "Yes. The best champions have tried the trial of activation for 300 cycles. All have failed." Jack made a sound that mechanics make when they're thinking, which was not very helpful. He got closer to the barrier and squinted at the details. He could tell from here that the armor wasn't just on display. It was on some kind of platform and was held in place by clamps or supports. But those weren't new. Someone added those later. "Can you take down the wall for a second?" Jack asked. "I want to see something." "Not at all. The energy field stays. Come on." "I'm not a warrior. I'm a mechanic. I'm not going to do anything dumb." Queln's tentacles moved as if they were annoyed. But there was something about the way the person spoke, a relaxed confidence that made it seem like he knew what he was doing. And really, what could 5 minutes hurt? The armor had held up against the smartest people in the galaxy. One human mechanic wasn't going to break anything. "Okay. 5 minutes. If you break anything though, your ship will be taken away and you will be charged with a crime." "That's fair," Jack said as he rolled up his sleeves. With a soft sound, the energy barrier flickered and then vanished. Jack stepped forward, and for the first time in 300 years, someone walked up to the warsuit of Kethmar without any ceremony, preparation, or sense of duty. A mechanic who saw a machine and wanted to know how it worked. He stopped in front of the armor, close enough to touch it, and turned his head. He looked at every detail with a professional and analytical eye. Other aliens in the hall had noticed by now and were watching this strange human who had somehow gotten permission to get close to their most sacred relic. A few of them looked upset. Some people looked interested. Jack took a small flashlight out of his pocket and shined it on one of the shoulder joints. He got close and looked at the seams and connections. He slowly walked around the armor, checking different parts. He made small humming sounds every now and then to show that he was thinking. His 5 minutes were running out, but he didn't seem to care. Interesting, he said to himself more than anyone else. Very interesting. Queln moved closer. What have you seen, human? Jack stood up straight and stared at the overseer. The jellyfish being couldn't quite figure out what was going on in his face. It was a mix of surprise and understanding. I think I know why nobody can get this thing to work, Jack said. Jack began to walk slowly around the armor, like he would around a broken engine or a damaged hull section. His eyes were always moving, taking in every detail. The other aliens in the hall were looking at him with a mix of confusion and interest. Warriors had approached this armor with respect, ceremony, modern technology, and old rituals. This person was looking at it like someone would look at a car that wouldn't start. How old did you say this thing is? Jack asked, his eyes still on the armor. Overseer Queln shook a little. About 12,000 cycles. That would be about 12,000 years in your human years. Understood. Jack whistled softly. And in all that time, has anyone ever done any basic upkeep on it? There was a break. Queln's tentacles moved in a way that made it look like it was confused. It's a holy object. Our best technomancers have looked at every circuit, power matrix, and quantum field generator. We use tools that can find changes at the molecular level to scan it. We have. Yeah, but did anyone just look at it? Jack cut in and pointed to the shoulder joint. Really look at it? Not with quantum scanners or anything like that. Just eyes and common sense. He moved closer and pointed to a group of mechanical parts near where the arm connected to the body. Look at that spot that's not the same color as the rest of the area. The greenish-blue stuff around the edges? That's rust. Oxidation. These joints have been outside for thousands of years, and no one has cleaned or treated them. And look here, he said, pointing lower at what looked like a servo motor. These servos are stuck. The oil probably dried up about 10,000 years ago. Queln floated closer and its body changed colors. But the power systems are working. Our scans show that energy is flowing through. Sure, the power is there, Jack said as he moved to look at the leg joints. But power doesn't matter if the parts can't move. It's like having a full tank of gas in a car that won't start. The gas is fine but nothing is moving. He stopped for a moment to think that the alien probably didn't know what a car was. It's like having a healthy brain but your joints are locked up. The mind is working but the body can't move. Other aliens were coming together now because of the noise. A tall, crystal-like creature that looked rich and important pushed its way through. The human insults what we do. We have used the most cutting edge. All I'm saying is that everyone has been acting like this is a computer problem when it's really a mechanical problem. You all have been trying to talk to it, connect with it, and use it. But you can't connect with something that's stuck in place. He walked around to the back of the armor and ran his flashlight along the spine. Check this out. Do you see these hydraulic lines? They've turned to stone. The liquid inside has probably become sludge. He pointed to a connection point and said, and this power coupling here, it's loose. Just shook loose over time. It happens all the time on ships. The whole body of Queln turned a deep purple color. Are you saying that the biggest mystery in the galaxy, the one that has beaten our best warriors and scientists, is just a mechanical failure? Not failure, Jack said. Neglect. This is really good engineering. But nothing lasts forever if you don't take care of it. You need to clean, oil, check, and adjust everything. Even armor from aliens from long ago. He took his toolkit out of his belt. It was a metal case that had been through a lot of wear and tear. It had been with him for 15 years and had been repaired more times than he could count. What are you up to? Queln asked, sounding worried. Fixing it, Jack said simply, opening the toolbox. There were tools inside that any mechanic would recognize, like wrenches, screwdrivers, pliers, and wire cutters. There was also a blue and yellow aerosol can that didn't fit in with the high-tech galactic arsenal. You can't just, this is a sacred, you have no authority. Queln was changing colors quickly now, which Jack's translator said meant he was in trouble. You gave me 5 minutes and permission to look, Jack said calmly. I'm looking. And while I'm looking, I'm going to do something. If it doesn't work, it's not a big deal. The armor has been broken for 12,000 years. 5 more minutes won't matter. Jack shook the aerosol can and sprayed a stream of clear liquid into the shoulder joint before Queln could make a clear protest. The smell hit right away. It was sharp, chemical, and clearly based on oil. It was a smell that every mechanic on Earth knew by heart, but to the aliens in the hall, it was strange and a little scary. The alien that looked like a crystal made a sound like glass breaking. "What is that stuff?" "WD-40, Jack said, moving to the elbow joint and spraying it too. "Water displacement, 40th formula. We've been using it for about 400 years on Earth. It's an oil that gets deep into things. Removes moisture, loosens rusted parts, and stops corrosion. Basic supplies for maintenance. Every mechanic has one." He talked while he worked, spraying each joint in a planned way. "Put a little bit here, work it in, and let it sink in." He moved the shoulder joint by hand. At first it didn't want to move, but then it did, making a grinding sound. Just like Betty's landing gear. The same problem has the same solution. The aliens were shocked and speechless as this human, who had accidentally entered their most sacred hall, did what looked like the mechanical equivalent of giving the armor a bath. He sprayed, waited, moved the joints back and forth by hand and sprayed again. He used his fingers to follow the hydraulic lines, looking for connection points and checking seals. He moved with confidence and skill, like someone who had fixed 1,000 machines and knew exactly what he was doing. Jack said, "This coupling here," as he reached behind the armor's back plate. "Yeah, just like I thought." Shook loose. There was a click, then a click that sounded more solid. "That's it. That should finish the power circuit for the limb actuators." He stepped back and wiped his hands on a rag he took out of his pocket. He had definitely been there for 5 minutes and probably even longer, but no one had stopped him. No one could move because they were all so shocked. Jack looked over his work, nodded to himself, and then looked at Overseer Queln. "Okay, try it now," he said. "Try what?" "Activating it," Queln said weakly. "The system should be able to start up now that the mechanical parts aren't stuck. But we don't have anyone ready for the trial, and no champion is here to." "You don't need a champion," Jack said. "Just turn it on. There should be a way to start up, a self-test mode or something like that. Any piece of equipment this smart would have one." Queln looked at the armor, then at Jack, and then at the group of aliens who were now quiet. This was crazy. This broke every rule. But the Overseer hesitated because of the human's casual confidence. What if he was right? What if the answer was really this simple? "Computer," Queln said to the station AI, "start Warsuit Startup Protocol Alpha." Nothing happened for a while. The hall held its breath. Then there was a hum, so quiet at first that some people thought they were imagining it. A deep, resonant sound that sounded like it came from inside the armor. The chest plate started to light up with small blue dots that quickly spread across the surface like stars coming out at night. The armor shifted. Just a little bit, just a tiny change as internal systems came online and servos that hadn't moved in 12,000 years suddenly remembered how to do it. The hum got louder and more sure of itself. The panels on the arms and legs started to glow. A soft golden light came from the eye slits in the helmet. The warsuit of Kethmar rose a little off its mounting platform, now being held up by its own power instead of the support clamps. As they went through what looked like a calibration sequence, the servos and the joints made smooth whirring sounds. One arm went up, bent at the elbow and turned at the shoulder. Next the other arm. The legs moved, which tested their range of motion. Ancient weapon systems inside the armor powered up, ran diagnostics, and showed that they were ready on screens that hadn't been used in thousands of years. Then, just as smoothly as it had woken up, the armor fell back asleep. The lights went out and turned into a soft standby glow. The hum got so quiet that it was hard to hear. But now everything about it was different. It used to be a statue, a beautiful dead body. It was now sleeping, resting, and waiting for someone to wake it up. The ceremonial hall was a mess. Aliens were yelling in many different languages. Some were yelling, some were arguing, and some were just standing there with their mouths open. The crystal being that had asked Jack a question before was flashing colors so quickly that it looked like a disco ball. Overseer Queln was so shocked that he became completely clear. Jack just stood there, cleaning his hands and putting his tools back in his toolbox. He seemed pretty happy with himself. It looked like a light show because Overseer Queln's body changed colors so quickly. The jellyfish-like creature changed colors from purple to green to orange and then to colors that humans couldn't even name. Jack's translator implant was trying to figure out what all these colors meant, but it kept saying there was a problem. No matter what Queln was feeling, it was strong and complicated. The ceremonial hall had gone from being a mess to something more like a religious awakening around them. Warriors from a dozen different species stood there, staring at the war suit as if they had never seen it before. Some of them were shocked and had their mouths open. The translator helpfully called some of the sounds extreme surprise and disbelief. Some of them were crying, but their tears didn't look like human tears at all. One of the crystal beings, not Thel9 but someone from the same species, was on their knees. It hurt to look directly at their bodies because the light was so bright. They kept saying the same thing in their own language, and the translator kept saying, "Impossible, impossible, impossible." Queln was finally able to get it together enough to talk. You? The overseer tried again. "You figured it out. You completed the trial of activation after 300 cycles. The armor is awake. It has picked you to carry it." Jack looked up from where he was cleaning his hands with a rag. "Chosen me? No, I just fixed it." "That's not the same." "But you did what no one else could," Queln said, floating closer. The tentacles were moving in ways that made it look like they were very upset. "You will become the Concord Sentinel. You will be in charge of our best troops. You will have power over—" "Whoa, hold on," Jack said, holding up his hands. There was still a wrench in it. "Hey, I have to go back to my ship in about 20 minutes. Captain Grant is probably already wondering where I am, and she will be very angry if I'm late. I just fixed your suit. That's all I did." "That's it." A huge alien with 4 arms pushed through the crowd. It was another Draken, most likely a relative of the Knight Captain who had tried and failed before. "You have done what our best warriors could not, human. You have brought back to life the most holy object in the known galaxy. You can't just walk away." Jack shrugged and put the wrench back in the toolbox. "Why not? I'm a mechanic, so I fix things. That's what I do. I fixed the armor because it needed it. But I don't know the first thing about being a warrior, a sentinel, or anything else. Someone who knows how to use that suit needs to be there." He pointed at the warriors who were there. "Some of you probably know things about fighting that I could never imagine. The suit is working now. It can be worn by someone else. Go be a hero." "But the prophecy says—" Another alien started. "I don't know anything about prophecies," Jack said firmly. He was beginning to feel uneasy about all the attention. "And I really need to leave. I need a plasma injector for my ship, and the parts depot is probably closing soon." Queln's colors had turned into a kind of gray-green that didn't make sense. "Do you really not want to claim the armor? To become the Sentinel?" "Nope. Not for me. I enjoy my work. I like my boat. Thanks for not making me responsible for the fate of the galaxy." Jack put his tools away and clipped them back to his belt. Then he stopped and looked at the war suit, which was still glowing softly in standby mode. He walked over to the mounting platform and carefully set the can of WD-40 down next to where the armor's feet were. The blue and yellow can stood out like a sore thumb among all the high-tech displays and ceremonial decorations. Jack took a small notepad and pen out of his pocket. He was probably the only person on the whole station who still had a pen and paper. They never ran out of batteries and worked in any situation. He wrote something down, ripped it off, and stuck it to the can of WD-40. The note said, "Every 500 hours of use, spray the joints. Every month, check the levels of the hydraulic fluid. Don't forget to clean the servos. You're welcome. Jack Miller, Betty's Revenge." He stepped back, nodded to himself, and then walked away. The aliens moved aside for him like he was a king, which made him feel even worse. All he wanted to do was find the parts depot, get his plasma injector, and get back to work. "Wait," Queln said. "Please tell us your name, human. Let's write down who solved the trial." He said, "Jack Miller," over his shoulder. "But really it wasn't that hard. You guys were just making it too hard." He then left, going back into the service corridor from which he had come. A hall full of aliens was left behind, trying to figure out what had just happened. For the next few hours, things were crazy at Station Valoris. Quantum communication arrays sent the news to every part of the galaxy faster than light could travel. A human mechanic with a can of penetrating oil and 15 minutes of work had fixed the warsuit of Kethmar, the impossible challenge that had baffled the greatest minds in galactic history. Scientists started looking into what Jack had done right away. They looked at the security footage from every angle, watching him spray and work the joints, reconnect the power coupling, and do basic maintenance that any first-year engineering student would know how to do. People who had spent decades studying advanced theories about why the armor wouldn't work found it almost offensive how simple it was. But the proof was right there, softly humming in its corner. The war suit did what it was supposed to do. It was ready to be worn again after 12,000 years. 3 days later, Commander Breck, a Draken warrior, stepped up to try the trial of activation. He was younger and less experienced than the Knight Captain who had tried before, but he still volunteered. He walked up to the armor with respect, but not the awe that warriors from the past had shown. He had seen the video of Jack Miller. He had learned something from it. As soon as Breck touched the armor, it moved. The lights got brighter, the servos turned on, and the suit opened up like a flower, showing the inside that no one had ever seen before. Breck went inside and the armor closed around him. There was a moment of adjustment when the system synced with his body and learned how he moved and thought. Then he raised one arm and the warsuit's arm moved with him in perfect time. The bond was finished. The warsuit of Kethmar had finally found its new sentinel after failing 300 times. Breck would go on to serve for 20 years, protecting the Concorde from threats from both inside and outside. People would talk about him with the same respect as they do the ancient First Sentinel. But he never forgot how he got there. He would spray the joints and check the hydraulics before every mission, just like the note said. He also made sure that every Sentinel after him did the same thing. The Galactic Concorde called an emergency meeting of their High Council. They had to talk about what this meant, not just that the armor was working but also what it showed about how they dealt with problems. One person with no advanced degrees, special training, or magical powers had solved something that their smartest and best people couldn't. The effects were huge. They came to a decision after 3 days of talking about it. The Concorde Military Academy, which trained the best soldiers and strategists in the galaxy, built a new wing. The Institute of Practical Engineering was the name of the school that taught people how to do basic mechanical repairs. The first teachers were all people, including mechanics and engineers who were hired from freighters, stations, and shipyards all over human space. They showed aliens how to use wrenches and screwdrivers, how to spot rust and wear, and how to take care of equipment instead of just using it. For many of the older species, it was a humbling experience. They had spent thousands of years developing advanced technology that went beyond what they thought of as primitive mechanical engineering. They had AIs that could make weapons, nanomachines that could build ships, and quantum computers that could solve problems that biological minds couldn't understand. But at some point they forgot that a machine with stuck joints won't work no matter how advanced its computer is. The can of WD-40 was put in a clear aluminum case next to the warsuit's platform. It became almost as well known as the armor itself. People would come to see both and read the note that Jack had left. Some people thought it was funny. Some people thought it was deep. Some people thought it was embarrassing because it was a reminder that the answer to an impossible question can be so simple that you don't even think about it. Jack Miller had no idea about any of this when he was on Betty's Revenge. He found the parts store with 10 minutes to spare before it closed, bought his plasma injector for what he thought was too much money, and then went back to the ship. The installation took about 3 hours, which included the time he spent swearing when he dropped a wrench into the engine compartment and had to fish it out. Captain Grant wanted to know why it took so long at the station. Jack said he had gotten lost and ended up in a museum. He talked about fixing an old suit of armor, but the way he said it made it sound like it was as important as oiling a door hinge that squeaks. Grant shook her head and told him to be more careful next time. Betty's Revenge made its cargo run to the outer colonies on time. The plasma injector worked perfectly, and Jack was already thinking about the main coolant system, which was making a noise it shouldn't have been making. He thought that the next time he had to do maintenance he would have to flush it and replace some seals. He never looked at news feeds from space. He had no idea that human mechanics were suddenly in high demand on 1,000 worlds, with job offers pouring in with salaries that would make a corporate executive green with envy. He didn't know that there were songs about him in 300 languages or that schools were teaching his name along with the names of great scientists and warriors from history. Jack Miller just kept working, keeping Betty's Revenge in the air, fixing things that broke and taking care of things before they broke. When he was working on a piece of equipment that was being particularly difficult, he would sometimes take out his can of WD-40, spray the problem area, and grumble to himself about how people always think too much. The awakening of the warsuit of Kethmar will go down in galactic history as a turning point. It was the time when the galaxy found out that humans' real strength wasn't their fighting spirit or their ability to think outside the box, even though they had both. They were good at solving problems by doing things. Other species reached for the stars, but people remembered to check if the ladder was stable first. That made all the difference at times.